I am joined today by my friend Andy. Hello, Andy.
Hello, Andy.
Yes, it's the other Andy B on the station, which does get a little bit confusing. I am the original Andy
Sometimes.
B. That's all I'm going to
Yeah.
say.
Original and best, I say.
I would say so. We're here today to talk about your latest book. Yeah, that's about right. Which is called From Doubt to Disciples Unlocking the Great Commission. And there's a really amazing forward from someone named Andy B.
There is the very same Andy B. Some say it's the highlight of the book, but I wouldn't want to comment on that.
I definitely can't comment. Um, just give us an overview. What was the purpose of this book? What are you hoping to help it to do?
Yeah, so I originally wrote. It began as a series on my blog, a series of posts that I wrote on my blog, and then it sort of evolved and developed from there into the book. So it really the idea was examining the Great Commission as sort of set out in Matthew 28. So Jesus's kind of commands to his disciples for what they were to do, but I sort of felt like a lot of people don't really understand what the Great Commission is. It sounds very straightforward on the face of it, and everybody kind of recognizes, oh yeah, that's the mission Jesus left the church to fulfill. And I guess if you asked a lot of people, and this is kind of the concept of the book, is how would you describe the Great Commission? A lot of people would probably answer, it's telling other people about Jesus. And that's true in a kind of a general sense. But actually, if you read Jesus's words, it's a lot more specific than that. He goes into a lot more detail. And so the thought behind the book was really to try and explore kind of step by step through the words that Jesus left with us as the Great Commission. Is it simply just telling other people about Jesus? Well, certainly that's part of it, but actually it goes a lot deeper than that. And so the book takes us through that journey really and says, right, well, actually, what are the things that Jesus left for us to do? And then a few ideas about how we could actually fulfill them.
I guess the most obvious question for me to ask right now is what was the thing that surprised you as you started to look deeper into this and think, okay, so the Great Commission, the idea of telling people about Jesus, it's more than that. Was there a component of the more than that part that made you a bit surprised and you thought, I didn't actually know that was there?
Yeah, I guess what surprised me was so as I say, initially everybody thinks, oh, it's telling other people about Jesus. People kind of bracket it into the Great Commission is evangelism, and while that's true, I think Jesus also talks about making disciples. He talks about teaching people all of the things that he taught them. Um, and that is far more than evangelism, isn't it? That's not something you can just do overnight. So with evangelism, we talk about sharing our faith, witnessing for Jesus, and telling people what He's done in our lives, and that's very much the start of an individual's kind of Christian journey. But really, the Great Commission goes far deeper than that. It rather than just introducing people to Christ, it then introduces them to His teachings and turns them, as I say for the title, really from a place of doubt through to a place of discipleship, which is a much deeper commitment. And I guess that surprised me a bit, really. Like I say, I always like everybody else associated it with the Great Commission. That's evangelism. That's telling other people about Christ, and that's all great. But actually, it goes much further than that.
And I think that's quite a relevant point. I mean, I remember going back in time just a little bit, and you'd have evangelism, and people talk about evangelism with a capital E and evangelism with a little e, and they
Yeah,
were trying to reference and sort of, I suppose, succinctly say, well, there are evangelists, people whose life's mission is this.
yeah.
This is their day job, if you like. And then there are the little e evangelists, and that's the rest of us. And I always remember thinking, wasn't that a bit condescending? That what? So you're saying they're more important than us, and what we do doesn't matter. And
Yeah.
actually, I mean, Billy Graham is a very easy example that still today the name means something to many people. He would
Yeah.
stand at the front of 50,000 people and say, you need to do this. Okay, there's an evangelist. But actually, it's the day to day stuff of the little e evangelists, so called, although I don't like the title at all, or that way of describing things, because it isn't something for just the Billy Grahams of the world. It really is something that Jesus said to each one of us that we should do.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think that's really important because yes, there are certain individuals who have a particular gift for evangelism, a spiritual gift of evangelism, and Billy Graham was a great example of that. You know, because if you like kind of listen back to his sermons or his messages, you know, are those messages so much better than other people's messages? And the answer is probably not. But he had this specific gift of evangelism that really helped people kind of make that step, make that commitment to Jesus. But even if we don't have a specific gift for evangelism, we're still all called to do it. So it's not just a case of, oh well, actually evangelism is not my job because I don't have that gift. And I kind of liken it to, no different from teaching. Teaching. There are some people who have a specific gift to teach the Bible and to teach, Jesus's commands, and that's great. But actually, we all have a responsibility to do that. Whether that's in a parent-child situation, maybe we're teaching our children about the Bible, maybe we're in a home group or something like that, and maybe we're not leading the home group. Maybe the person with the specific teaching gift is leading it, but maybe we're just a part of it. But actually, we're still sharing our understanding. We're still sharing with other people and helping them to understand. So that's teaching. So we're all so yes, there are particular gifts, there are particular offices or roles that people might have, but there are certain things that Jesus wanted us all to do, and the Great Commission wasn't limited to just those with an evangelistic gift. It was clearly left for us all to follow in our own way, and that's what I try to explore in the book, really, that there's no one way to do it. It's not a case of this is the way to share our faith, this is the way to fulfill the Great Commission, because that's not the case. We're all different, we're all individual, and so there's different ways in which we can do that. The way you do it, Andy, with the radio station and the magazine and everything else, might be very different to how I do it, working in an office, working in a secular job, or whatever it might be. So there's just different roles in different places.
I suppose one of the things that we probably need to do, because I don't like religious jargon and we're using a little bit of that, but let's just break down for us. I mean, there's a few terms. We're using the words teaching, evangelism, and discipleship. Can you break each of those three words down and just simplify it? What are we really talking about with those three different elements of this book?
Yep. So absolutely. So teaching is I guess the most straightforward one, a word we use all the time. It's about imparting knowledge. It's sharing knowledge with other people. And Jesus, when he spent his time on earth, he taught his disciples, his followers, his friends, lots of things, and taught them how to live. And when we're talking about teaching people the things that Jesus taught, we're passing on his teaching to other people. So teaching is the most straightforward one, I guess. Disciple is probably not a word we use that often, or discipleship, but a disciple just means follower. It's someone who follows Jesus. I explore this in the book, really. It's about how we follow Jesus, and it's more than just like a physical following. It's actually a commitment to follow him, to follow in his ways of doing things. And I think the other one was evangelism, or evangelist. Evangel is kind of good news. It's about proclaiming the good news. I think I forget the original meaning of the word. I think it was to do with the person who brought the good news about a victory, or the person who brought the good news about after a battle, they would run to tell the good news to the king or something. Or and evangelism is about sharing good news. So it's about telling other people the good news that we believe as Christians.
And then when you combine those three elements, you've got, I'm guessing, really that. I mean, I've read the book. I have read the book because I've done a Ford. But that's the heart of the book. It's bringing those three, I'm going to call them core components or core elements of how we're supposed to walk through day by day. How do we then teach or disciple someone or evangelize somebody who doesn't know Jesus and who doesn't want to know Jesus?
Yeah, that's a good question. So I think that I think the main answer I would give to that is that what we're supposed to be doing is witnessing. And it was quite interesting. I was listening to something over the weekend that sometimes we as Christians, when we approach evangelism, we don't approach it as a witness. If you think about a witness in a courtroom, they're not there to act as the judge. They're not there to act as the defense attorney. They're not there to act as the prosecutor. They're there to be the witness. They're there just to tell the truth about what they've seen. And that's all we're supposed to be doing. And I don't mean to make that sound simplistic, because it's not. But equally, we're not supposed to be trying to convince people, twist their arm, persuade them to believe in Jesus. We're simply telling other people what we've seen, what we know of Jesus, what he's done in our lives. And I think that's a really good starting point, because I think sometimes when we approach evangelism, we can have our own agenda. Really, we're looking for success, we're trying to do this, we're trying to do that. We've got a program, or we've just been on a course and we've learned this new technique for sharing our faith, so we're trying to apply that. But everybody's different. I'm not the sort of person who is probably going to, I'm not particularly gifted at standing out on the street handing out tracts, for example. That's a classic picture of evangelism that some might have, but that's just not my gifting, really. That's not where I kind of excel. I'll do that, like we touched on earlier, really, the difference between an evangelist and all of us being evangelical. But I think it's a case of saying, well, actually, what is our role? Is it just being there? Is it being friends and being kind to people? Is it and then just when opportunities arise to just tell people what we know about Jesus and what he's done in our own lives. So it isn't about convincing people. It isn't about twisting their arm, as I say. It's just about telling them what we've seen, what we know, and ultimately we can't convict someone or convince someone into believing in Jesus ourselves. That's God's job. That's the Holy Spirit's job. So all we can do is just be there to tell the truth, to tell the person, whether they're open to it or otherwise, what we've seen and what we believe. And that's pretty much where our role stops. Anything beyond that is really for God to do and to change people's hearts into believing in him.
I think that's a really interesting way of assessing this, because many people, I think, would be, well, I can't talk to anybody about my relationship with God. It's a very private, personal thing, and I don't want to convince them to change who they are and all that. And I've heard lots of reasons why we shouldn't be trying to talk to people about Jesus. But I love the analogy you just gave, that you heard, of the witness in a courtroom.
Yep.
Who's literally asked a set of questions and pretty much yes or no. Did you see this person? Could you recognize this person? Are they in this courtroom? They're not asking for their opinion. They're asking for a factual yes or no to something. I know they elaborate sometimes, but that's kind of the point of the court is, did you see this thing happen or did you not? And when you're stating that in that courtroom, obviously you're then stating, yes, I saw this person and they stole that car. I recognize them because they had a rucksack on that I saw later, and they had a beard and it was burned on one side. Then you start to have some facts brought in that now are starting to say, yes, I saw that person.
Yeah.
No, but just exactly. Like a courtroom, that one witness is never going to be enough to convict anybody. There has to be other corroborating information. So they're not trying to win the case. Like you say, they're there just to give one perspective, which is their own perspective on a set of events, which is what we see, I suppose, other very clearly similarity to that would be the New Testament. Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. They are literally witnesses to what Jesus did, and they wrote what they saw. Just like a diary entry, almost, a bit more than that, but simplified, basically diary entry of Jesus's life, but from the perspective of Matthew, Mark, or Luke, or John.
And that's absolutely right. So the book of Luke in the Bible, which is the quite a detailed account of Jesus' life, was possibly I don't think this is definitive, but it was possibly part of the evidence that was submitted. So Paul, the Apostle Paul, who was kind of on trial for sharing his faith, he appealed to Caesar, and I've heard it said that the Luke's document was part of that evidence. It was a statement of, this is what we've seen, this is what Jesus did, this is his life, and it sets it all out right from the beginning through to the end. It's a document. It's part of that evidence, really, and I think that's the case. Really, I think we sometimes feel an immense amount of pressure as Christians to, and it's self-inflicted pressure to share our faith. And clearly, it's the right thing to do. If we find, it's like if you find the cure to cancer and you keep it to yourself, clearly that's wrong. Well, we as Christians believe that we found, this amazing treasure in Jesus. So it would be completely wrong of us not to tell other people about it. But we put this pressure on ourselves to be able to convince other people that what we believe is true. And actually, that's not really our job. Our job is just to simply tell them what God has done in our own lives and what we believe about Jesus. And if people are open to it, they can ask more questions. They can read the Bible for themselves. They can look into it more deeply. But that job of convincing someone, it doesn't come from us. It comes from God Himself. So I think it should take some pressure off of us. But it still doesn't. It's still hard. Evangelism is still hard. I personally, I haven't written this book from the perspective of someone who's got it all figured out. I've seen people who are so naturally gifted at evangelism or telling other people or sharing their faith. And it's amazing, and that really isn't me, which is part of why, I wrote the book the way that I did, which was really examining Jesus's words, that and part of the book talks about Jesus's authority, and making sure that we don't just think, oh well, this is kind of a suggestion, Jesus is just making a suggestion that we do it. Well, actually, he sets out quite clearly who he is, his own authority, and that we're to do this. This is, the mission of the church is to share our faith with a world that needs to hear it. And some will reject us, some will ignore it, others will want to know more. So and it's not our job to kind of work out which is which. Our job is just to tell people what we've seen, what we know, and let them make up their own minds.
So this book, I'm just trying to remember how many pages it was. What was it, 70?
Yeah, it's not the biggest
pages.
book, but it's it's hopefully a quick read. You could read it in one sitting if you're a voracious reader.
But I do remember reading this when you sent me a forward of it, and I thought, this is just a really simple book. It's really easy to read, which is important, because some books, I like some of the stuff that John Stott has done. Very great Christian theologian. You also need to be, in certain ways, quite academically minded to really understand some of the concepts and constructs. It's brilliant. It's not a 5-minute read. You need to study each sentence and reflect on it. What I do like is a book like this, where it's sufficiently simple that you can read it fairly easily, whilst at the same time, if you want to go a bit deeper, you can. And if you want to go a lot deeper, you can. Because I think that it's a particular writing style which makes it very accessible for every single one of us. How do we get hold of said book?
Well, it's available on Amazon, so you can go to Amazon in your region and just search for From Doubt to Disciples by Andy Brown. It should come up. So it's available on paperback, but you can get a Kindle version as well if you prefer to read that way.
Cool. From Doubt to Disciples, Unlocking the Great Commission by the legend Andy Brown, not the other Andy B. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Here at Pure 24/7 Radio, we have had the privilege of speaking to some amazing people with amazing stories.
Now, what about, I thought I'd go a bit further, what about goat and sheep's milk?
Yeah.
Becoming quite popular. Very similar to cow's milk. So we don't use it in the first year of life, you can afterwards. And their nutrient profiles, how good they are, is pretty similar to cow's milk. Allergenicity, how often do they cause allergies? About the same. They're a bit more expensive sometimes. It's pretty equivalent.
Yeah, we're really excited, especially excited for Josh because it's his first book and he's really passionate with that Gen. Do you say Gen Z or Gen Z? I've heard it said in.
I don't know. I'm too old. I don't know.
Yeah, we're not in that age category, so we've not got a clue what they're called.
It's a pot boiler. It's a good, exciting popcorn thriller. I didn't think it was anything too special, but I think watching it at home, people will probably enjoy it more than I did going to the cinema to see it. Really good film.
I love it. I walk into a cinema and I turn my phone off. Nobody can get hold of me for a couple of hours. I'm in a completely other world. Every single time I go to the cinema, and for me, it's like going to Oz. It's like going to another world and escaping and relaxing, and I thoroughly enjoy it.
If you have missed any of these interviews or would like to hear them again, you can. Simply head over to our catch-up section at www.pure247radio.org. That's www.pure247radio.org.